Hello and welcome to the Pink Grape. My name is Anthony Metzger. I'm a winemaker and certified sommelier. Here at the Pink Grape, I interview winemakers from all over the planet. I conduct my interviews via Skype and record them live to bring you face-to-face with winemakers from all over the world. So without further ado, please enjoy the show and be sure to subscribe. Hey Kevin.
Hey Anthony, how you doing? Nice to meet you proper.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining Wines of the World.
Yes, this is cool.
Well, yeah. So you've obviously traveled the planet making wine in various different countries. What would you say is like one story in particular that involves wine and adventure that tie in together? I mean, I'm sure you've got plenty of examples, but what's one that sticks out to you that you'll always remember as a winemaker?
When I showed up in New Zealand, I had won this, Craggy Range Memorial Scholarship. Super excited. I mean, it's an amazing experience. They, first of all, after this extensive selection process, which takes months and months, and they really just try to get the best candidate, they fly you in and pay for the airfare. And then you have a house waiting for you, a car waiting for you. Wow. You get paid, and at the end of the entire experience, they tour you around New Zealand to meet the best winemakers throughout the country and visit them for a day, and they'll teach you about how they make wine while you're there for that day.
Sure.
So, I mean, the whole thing is so amazing. Again, I can't repeat too often how grateful I am to Craggy Range and Douglas Weiser, because it's just really an amazing thing they do. So I walk down the street and I go introduce myself to the neighbor. Mm-hmm. This wonderful, 30-something lady answers the door, and she's super friendly. Oh, wonderful to meet you. And her son's there, and he greets me and says hello. And then the husband, boyfriend or husband, and it comes up. I think it was a fiance. They're about to get married, if I remember correctly. And the stepdad, of this son, comes up and meets me too. And she calls him over, and he says, "Oh yeah, actually, wonderful to meet you. I was just about to head out to shift some cattle." He says, And I go, "Oh, that's cool. Thanks for wonderful to meet you guys. Hopefully we can hang out a little bit while I'm here. It's great to meet the neighbors."
Sure.
Not thinking much of it. And then the guy says, "Yeah, what are you planning to do while you're here? You have any grand ambitions?" And I said, "Well, work the harvest." But I said, "That peak behind us looks pretty cool. I'm hoping that at some point, I can climb that peak. That would be pretty neat if I can do that before I leave."
Yeah, for sure.
And the guy goes, "You want to do it right now?"
No way.
I just got off a plane, 14 plane ride from California, and I'm going, probably not the best idea, but why not? Okay. So the guy says, "All right, let me finish shifting these cattle, and then we'll head off. Put on some good, hiking shoes, and something that got good grip because you don't want to slip and fall. We'll go ahead and climb the peak." The view from up there of this river rolling down the valley, and the mist laying over the river and laying over the green grasses and the farmhouses. I mean, it was absolutely magical.
Love at first sight.
That first view, that first sight, and my first day in New Zealand. I mean,
no kidding.
It's so
my goodness.
Special. That feeling you get when you're traveling, and sometimes it happens when you're making something special like wine.
Sure.
When you're doing something that inspires you, and it's like, I sometimes equate it to like seeing life in HD.
Wow.
It's this totally like surreal feel where every fiber of you is alive in that moment.
Sure.
You were so aware of every little thing, the sights, the smells, the feelings, the sensation of the wind on you, every one of your five senses is alive and tingling with every fiber of existence. They talk about being present and being in the moment. Yeah. There is no problem being in the moment at a moment like that. Like, you just feel so alive. It's insane. So
that's awesome.
That was a moment I was so alive and so in the moment. It was a really pretty amazing experience. And I never would have happened if it weren't for wine and for Craggy Range and Weiser and the inspiring wine world and world we live in. So that was awesome.
When you were down in Argentina making wine, how did the winemaking tie in with the local culture in Argentina? How did that tie together?
It's really interesting that tie between the local culture and the local experience, and then the international nature of wine. One of the interesting things is, we're living in an international world with international technology, and the wine industry in many ways has a spirit of sharing techniques, sharing technology.
Definitely.
We're a worldwide industry.
Okay.
And when I was at UC Davis, Roger Bolton gave me an introduction to this. He said, you're going to travel the world of wine, because I told him my plans. He said, you're going to meet the kindest people who will share their homes with you, share their secrets with you, share their techniques with you, and respect that community, show love for that community, and give back when you have the chance to, because you're going to be inspired by this kindness of the international wine community. And it's really true. I mean, that's what I've experienced. The local influence of the culture on the winemaking, I would say most comes through in the fact that the pay rate is so low there, they can afford to do things like have 20 people on a sorting table sorting through the grapes, so that the wine the grapes going into the tank are of absolute purity.
Nice.
Whereas somewhere with a higher cost of labor, like Australia, is going to end up using machinery, automized, computer-directed lasers with gusts of air to shoot green berries and leaves off the sorting table. So
that's interesting.
A lot of countries with expensive labor are going to buy technology.
Yep.
A company like Argentina, a country like Argentina with a company there is going to utilize the cheap local labor to do all sorts of hands-on stuff to replace machinery.
So you're a head winemaker at a winery right now. Tell me a little bit about the wine that you're making, and you've got full control of making a wine. What do you make right now, and what does it taste like? What do you make? Tell us a little bit about your wine.
Well, it's for me, my winemaking, after having traveled the world making wine in different areas, it's hard for me to settle down and just make one wine.
Sure.
So go to Oregon and make Pinot or something would probably kill my soul. And I've never lost that spirit of wanting to travel and explore and adventure. So I ended up going to a winery where we're a 10,000 case winery. We produce 20 different SKUs, 20 different individual wines.
Oh, you do?
Wow. From 17 different grapes. And that includes Malbec and Tremontes that I learned how to make in Argentina. It includes Pinot Noir that I made in Oregon and Sonoma.
Really?
Zinfandel that I made in Sonoma and Paso Robles. Cabernet Sauvignon that I made in Australia and other areas, and also for Shiraz in Australia. Okay. We make different wines and blends as well, that a lot of it comes from the influences I've had around the world, learning how they make a specific grape varietal. When you travel the world and make wine in different areas, you start to see overlap. What do all the great winemakers do, irregardless of the variety and irregardless of their personal style?
Yeah.
Well, the winemakers, in my opinion, are careful about their picking timing. They spend so much of their time in the vineyard making sure the grapes are amazing and making sure to pick them at the perfect timing to fit your style. A little earlier if you want more acid, lower alcohol, fresher fruit. A little later if you want more dark fruit, jammy, spicy intensity, and you don't mind higher alcohol and lower acid. So you see the timing of the pick is critically important. And then when the grapes come into the winery, sorting those grapes, selecting only the perfect ripeness, the nothing too overripe, nothing too underripe, no stems, no.
That's a lot of labor. That's a lot of attention. I mean, that's a heck of a process.
It's a little crazy, and it's why you can really only do it on the high end of the industry. It's why, bulk producers don't spend a whole lot of time sorting. Yeah. They just slam it through. Oh, we don't stop it. There's a rat in there. Who cares? Whatever. Yeah. A lot of the large producers cannot afford to stop that crusher, to stop that line. Yeah. They have to have that throughput. So sorting is like a ridiculous concept to them. Well, if you want pure wine, it's like a chef. If you said, hey, you're a master chef, and I'm going to ask you to make an amazing salad. Here are some soggy tomatoes. Here are some green tomatoes. And here's some rotten lettuce. Well, you can't make great salad. You can't make a great dish out of bad ingredients. Here's some rancid meat and oxidized spices. Well, you can't really do much with that. So as a winemaker, you have to be careful about the quality of your grapes. Make sure you have the absolute highest quality grapes. Sure. But then if there's something that makes it through the pick that isn't up to your standards, you have to select for your standards of quality if you're going to make great wine and great food.
Sure.
So the analogy between wine and food is pretty apt, I'd say.
Nice. Yeah, that is really well said. I like the comparison to like as a chef. You wouldn't even think about using bad ingredients in a salad if you had a nice restaurant and you were trying to impress people. And yeah, it's the same thing with wine, but people I didn't even think about it in that terms. I mean, that really is clear and makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, very cool. If you're at a baseball game and you're outside at the park, you're enjoying a baseball game in the afternoon, you've got a bratwurst with some nachos. Typically, traditionally, what you would do is you go and get the biggest beer you can find. But they're curious, what kind of wine would you drink with a bratwurst and some nachos at the ball game?
Well, you know what? You're at a ball game. It's probably hot outside. It's dusty. You want something refreshing. So
sure.
Red wine is like off immediately. So it's got to be a white or a rosé or a sparkling, because the cold, crisp refreshingness of those wines is going to be much better pairing. Yeah. With a hot day, ballpark environment, just wanting to relax and enjoy something cool like that. Now, in that situation, like sparkling immediately sounds delicious, because I mean, you just got the crisp refreshingness of that. Maybe a vintage champagne or a Crémant from France, which is going to have a sort of creamy butteriness from the yeast contact. It's going to go nice, that cheese on the nachos. Maybe a oaky, buttery Chardonnay wouldn't be bad either, because it's going to go with that creaminess, cheesiness in the nachos.
Sure.
But, at the same time, really, in the end, wine and food pairing, especially in a relaxed environment like that, drink whatever you like. Drink, what's the best wine for any situation? It's the wine you like.
Definitely.
It shouldn't be taken too seriously. So anything crisp, refreshing is going to go great in that situation.
Perfect. And another scenario I'm asked is, and you actually are probably the perfect person to ask this question, what kind of wine would you have if you're doing a day of backpacking and you're going to go walk through the foothills, or you're going to go walk the trails down by the river, the mountains? A lot of people actually like bringing wine on their trips, especially myself, but my followers too. They want to go on a hike and they want to bring some wine. What's a good wine to bring during the day on a hike?
Yeah, the real answer is a bag of wine.
A bag of wine. So get a wine that's in a bag. I have seen these like bags that are actually meant for backpacking, and you can clip them to your bag. I mean, that's pretty cool too. But what kind of wine would you drink?
Well, when you're backpacking, you've got your you got the backpack, and you got your sip straw from your Nalgene or whatever.
Oh, the CamelBak thing,
platter thing, CamelBak. Well, you can get a bag of wine, or you can put whatever you want in your CamelBak, and you could be drinking some hot Brion from France, and right out of your CamelBak if you want. So it doesn't matter what the wine is there.
Sure.
Well, what's the actual best wine for backpacking? I mean, there's two approaches to it. Again, there's you're hot and sweaty, you want something refreshing, white, probably. And, a wonderful crisp Sauvignon Blanc would be perfect, for example.
Nice.
But on the flip side, it's going to warm up in your backpack. And it's not going to be cold by the time you make it out there. So maybe a red wine that's okay warm would actually be a more practical option.
Okay.
And, my brothers and I love going backpacking. And we'll always bring wine or whiskey. I love bringing some scotch out backpacking. There's something about being out in the middle of the woods with maybe a nice Cuban cigar and a little bit of scotch.
Sweet.
That's perfect for it. On the same note, maybe a cigar and a really, dark, tannic red wine, kicking back above the trail, sipping on a little, complex red wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon, maybe even a Petit Syrah or a Tannat or something, something heavy that goes with that cigar, and just that badass experience of just being out in nature, just the elements, I think something that's got that woodsy smell, that little more oak influence, that, leather and tobacco kind of quality to it. Yep. Some old French wines have, or some heavier, dark red wines have.
Very cool. I actually went and studied in Napa, California, and they have beautiful little foothills there. And one day, very often I'd actually just go backpack the foothills for the day. And a wine I actually brought with me was an Asu wine from the Tokai region of Hungary. And that was beautiful, because it was like beaming down. It was 90 degrees. I'm backpacking, I'm sweating, and then I pull this out and I just have a little glass of it in my hiking mug. And I'm just sipping that as I'm walking, and my gosh, it was like, I've drinking a lot of that stuff because it's like one of my favorite wines, but that was probably my favorite setting in which I drank it, because just the beauty of that day, and then unbelievable flavors of that wine just matched just perfectly. That was nice. It was very good.
Yeah, wine is about great experiences, and one of the things I like to tell people about wine is, again, you can just enjoy it casually, but once you start getting more into wine, one of the great things is you can discover the world through wine. You can learn about the culture from which it came. You can think about the history of how that's made. You can think about the cultural aspects that drive that obsession. The French love very earthy and biological flavors, stinky cheeses and so on, how that cultural influences their winemaking. You can look at the science of how the wine is made, the chemistry behind the wine, the biology of the yeast and bacteria that create wine. It's a living object. That wine's basically probiotic. Yeah. And within a single glass of wine, you've got the entire world of science, culture, history, languages of how the people speaking it to make the wine. You've got so much influence, but then you've also got the experience of how you're consuming it, the culture of your friend group, your social group. The context, hiking or at a wonderful dinner, or the food pairing. The whole world is in a glass of wine. Yeah. And it's this little prism through which to see the world. But sometimes, while that's very inspirational to me and I think a lot of people, you also have to take a step back and as the Australians say, take the piss out of yourself. And one of the things I love to do is if someone says, "What aromas do you get in this wine?" And I'll swirl it and I'll go, subtle aromas of, a stallion galloping through Pacific Northwest rainforest, subtemperate rainforest, trampling some mushrooms, perhaps some blackberry bushes. And, the horse takes a fart, and then the aromas all coalesce into...
Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of The Pink Grape. Make sure you check in next week as I'll be releasing a new interview with a winemaker. If you have any questions that you would like me to ask a winemaker during any of my interviews, just reach out to me through my social media accounts, which you can find on my website, thepinkgrape.com. Make sure you check out my website this week, as I'll be releasing some really fun, interesting wine stories. Thank you, and please be sure to subscribe.